Hi, I'm Carl Sane, the secondary math specialist for Cabarrus County Schools. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of the changes to middle school math standards and then some of the curriculum docs changes that we made. And it's also to introduce you to a game that has been created to help you explore those changes a little bit more in detail. I do also want to mention that because of the new standards, the big takeaway for today's presentation is that with new standards, teachers need to be referencing the unpacking documents in all PLC meetings this year. All right, just an overview of the process that was used to create new standards was based on data and research and some surveys and other feedback. The state established some writing teams and they created a new set of standards. They then asked for some feedback on those drafts and then revised. And then, if I'm not mistaken, they actually went through that process twice and then submitted that about in June of 2017, so a little bit over 1 year ago. We had the new standards, and those were to be implemented this school year. As an overview of the writing team members, you can see that it was a mix of school level teachers, coaches, district level coaches, math specialists, and then some professors from higher education. Also notice that the number in parentheses is which region that individual was from. And so this was a mix of people from across the state that worked on these standards. As far as the feedback is concerned, the implementation of the Common Core asked for an improvement in the amount of math rigor, in coherence, and clarity of standards. And so that's how they measured the feedback about these new standards. And you can see that for middle school mathematics, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive with these new standards. I do want to mention that if you were to compare the old standards to the new standards, at first glance, the changes look very subtle, but as you explore the standards in greater detail, and particularly as you go into the unpacking document, the changes were actually pretty significant in the instructional expectations that were referenced. And that's the purpose of this PowerPoint, as well as the purpose of the game, is to kind of explore some of those differences, but also share the documents that teachers should be using to guide their PLC meetings. So most of those changes fell into one of three categories. So there were some standards that were removed if they were either not developmentally appropriate or if there was not connections within a grade level to that topic. There were some standards that were added to grade level to lengthen exposure over multiple grades. I'm going to talk about an example of that in just a minute. And then there were other standards where the language was modified to better address the instructional expectations. So sometimes the standard now actually explicitly tells teachers how to go about teaching something. So just as an example, I mentioned that some topics are extended over multiple grades, and so the division of fractions is one such example. It's now introduced in fifth grade, but fifth grade teachers are not expected to master division of fractions. It's now developed through sixth grade, and it's actually not supposed to be mastered with a standard algorithm until seventh grade. And so the purpose of that is twofold. For one, it gives students 3 years of time to master a really difficult concept, and they can actually work through several different iterations of learning about that concept. The other key is this enables teachers to make other connections within that grade level to that topic. So for instance, in fifth grade, students have been adding and subtracting fractions, but they've only added and subtracted related fractions. So they might have added 2/3 and 1/6 because those are related, but they would not have added 2/3 and 1/5 because they would have had to find a common denominator. Well, students have never found a common denominator because least common multiple is not introduced until sixth grade. So in fifth grade, they're just adding and subtracting related fractions, and they are multiplying fractions, but again, there's no common denominator required. So fraction division is then developed in sixth grade because again, you can refer to some of that work with least common multiple and adding and subtracting using common denominators. And so in sixth grade, they'll now actually divide fractions using common denominators, which is a skill that conceptually makes a lot of sense, but it's a skill that we've actually been skipping in the Common Core. And then using reciprocals to divide to divide fractions is now a 7th grade skill. So in 7th grade, you will master division of fractions using a standard algorithm, multiplying by the reciprocal. And so that's just an example to show how the standards progress over multiple grade levels. All right, so what we did during Curriculum Review Week was we started with the state's recommended pacing. So for the first time ever, the state has now endorsed a pacing guide. That pacing was actually created by a group of teachers called NC2ML, the North Carolina Collaborative for Math Learning, which is actually comprised of most of the same people that created those standards. The other reason we start with the state pacing is because NCDPI resources are going to be aligned to that pacing. So when you see our pacing guide and our year-long map, we took that directly from what the state is recommending. I do also want to mention that last year the state had come out with a high school pacing guide, and Cabarrus County Schools was not able to use it due to timing, and we ran into quite a bit of trouble with teachers going multiple different places to get resources. The pacings didn't line up. Any resources that were sent out by the state were not necessarily aligned to Cabarrus County Schools. So we felt like we needed to go with what the state provided, and we actually made that decision K-12 in mathematics to follow the state's pacing. So what the teams did do is that they aligned CMP3 to fit that pacing. They meticulously rewrote the stage 1, what students should know and what students should be able to do. And then they added resources to stage 2 and 3. And then I came back and added additional resources to stage 3 that are sorted by NCTM's effective teaching practices. So if you want to learn more about the effective teaching practices, there is a link in stage 3. It looks exactly like this chart. And at the top of that is a link to the effective teaching practices. Those are the 8 most important things that a math teacher can do in their instruction. And then what I've done is I've aligned resources according to those practices, and then also attached the standard to it so that you'll know exactly what it's supposed to reference. If you need help with how to use any of those, either the practices or any of those resources, feel free to contact me. All right, so I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to explore some of these standards in greater detail. I've created a game. The game uses what's called a deck toy. And so the purpose of this is to inform teachers of changes to the standards and documents. And so I'd like for you to better understand the importance of the unpacking documents, the changes to our curriculum documents, the purpose of the week of inspirational math. And I do also want to mention that I couldn't cover every single individual change in the standards. Instead, this game is going to expose teachers to the documents that you'll need to effectively plan using the UBD process. So you need to take this link and type that into a web browser, and it's going to take you to another presentation that's got the rules of the game. So I'm going to click on that link. What you're going to do with this game is you're going to move along a path, and the path looks very similar to this right side of the screen. One signpost will be shaking back and forth, and you'll click on that signpost. It will give you some directions, and you just need to follow those directions or click on the links that are provided. You'll continue clicking on signs and following directions and playing different mini games until you get to the finish line. Also in this PowerPoint, you can see that there's a 6th grade game, a 7th grade game, and a distinct 8th grade game. So we're going to play one briefly. So when you click on the links to that game, it's going to ask you a couple of different options to sign in. I'm going to sign in as a guest student. And you can see that after you type your name in, one signpost is blinking. It says welcome. You would follow those directions and then continue along the path. All right, that's it. So I hope you enjoy playing the game. If you have any questions about the game, or if you have any questions about curriculum documents or curriculum in general, don't hesitate to contact me at carl.sane@cabarrus.k12.nc.us. Best of luck this school year, and I want to thank you again for everything that you do for the students of Cabarrus County Schools. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.